some of my regular followers will know, but if you're new to the show is interactive. We do have a studio line that you can call in, or you can SMS and WhatsApp. And I now have a very lovely device that I'm going to start using so that I don't have to say the words. So bear with me.
Call in on our studio number, which is 0116 4822 086, or text in at 077 488 55055.
I will never ever get tired of that device. You can also chat with us through Facebook on Ramadan Radio FM. So please do, if you have any questions for our lovely guest this evening, then do either call in, message, or leave a comment. As always, I like to start my show by thanking the team at Ramadan Radio, because without my producer and without everyone working in the background, this show would not be possible. Along with thanking all of my guests, again, without whom the show would not be possible. And also my listeners and my viewers, thank you very much for tuning in and always giving me that support, because who doesn't love a little bit of confidence boost every now and then? So tonight, who do we have? Now, this is a woman I met recently this year when I was actually invited to the House of Lords, and she will remember what a memorable afternoon that was. And I'd been following her on LinkedIn for quite a while, actually, so I was quite familiar with who she was. So tonight we have Sarah Khan Bashir, MBE, and what I hope is going to be another epic series of everyday people breaking those stereotypes on a daily basis and overcoming challenges in their own unique way. And Sarah has been doing just that. Now, if you are familiar with LinkedIn, and if you do use that platform for whatever it is, for your work, or just a little bit of fun, I do recommend that you follow her. She does have a lot of inspirational tips, journeys, so much that she is doing. So before I carry on, I'm going to let Sarah introduce herself to us. Assalamu alaikum, Sarah, and welcome to the show.
Welcome, Salam Zainab. Thank you for that introduction. It's lovely to be here.
It's very, very nice to have you. So to my viewers who are used to having my guests in the studio, Sarah has joined us by Zoom. So if there is a few technical issues, then do bear with us. And I don't know if anyone would have noticed, my producer was walking around in the background. That was not because he wanted to be in the radio show. It is because he's trying to fix my camera. Sarah, so please can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are and your background,
Sure.
please.
Of course I can. So my name is Sarah Khan Bashir. I was born Sarah Khan and married a Bashir. So hence I thought, well, I don't want to forget my dad's name. So I'll just tag, husband's name onto the end of it. And I'm a solicitor, and I'm the founder and owner of SKB Law, which is a law firm based in the north of England, but we have hubs in Cardiff and London too. We specialise in family law, so it's everything around divorce, separation, prenuptial agreements, anything to do with family life that doesn't go the way you want it to go. We also have an academy alongside the law firm, and we created that in 2019 to help people who want to get into law by providing legal training, employability workshops, anything to try and give them, an equal chance as other people that were getting into the legal field. But because of social backgrounds and cultural differences, they were finding it difficult to enter that field. So that's what we do sort of on the legal side. That telling those stories to others had more of an impact upon the community and the people around us than did me telling them, saying, make sure you register your marriage, make sure you do this. So we started a podcast about 2 years ago now, called Family Matters, and that's been quite fun to do, but been really popular as well. And then just recently, I've just written an ebook all around the nikah nama and about tips about how to get the best out of your nikah nama, just like a guide on how to break down the clauses that are and should be in the nikah now, and that's I've just done that recently, actually.
Fantastic, wonderful. Now, Sarah, from what I know of you, because I know of you, I've met you, but I don't know you as like I wouldn't know a friend because we've not had that communication, that interaction. But I have found you to be quite humble, because one of the things that you have actually left out, and I don't believe you've done that on purpose, it is because you're a very humble person, but it does deserve recognition. Now, what you've missed out is that you were named Lawyer of the Year at the 2022 Modern Law Awards. And very recently, you won Yorkshire Lawyer of the Year, and that was this year, 2023. And you are regarded as one of the UK's leading family lawyers with a specialisation in South Asian divorce. Many, many, many congratulations to you on that, Sarah, especially being of BAME background. I can imagine it's not been an easy journey. It's certainly not something that South Asians are used to being recognised for. So well done, and hats off to breaking those glass barriers. So before we start getting into the challenges and any tips that you might have for our viewers, and what I really want to know, and this is a question I do tend to ask majority of my guests. What did you want to be when you were growing up?
Okay, so that's an easy question. So
I'll be gentle throughout.
Going with easy ones first. And the truth is, I don't know. I didn't know. You're talking around about, I'm giving my age away here, but you're talking about 40 years ago when I was at school in Sheffield. That's where I grew up. And there wasn't many role models that looked like me, you know, even within the small community of South Asians that had managed to connect and find each other. There wasn't anyone that sort of, in terms of professional careers, were, you know, someone that we thought, oh, we'd like to do that, we'd like to be that. We heard the whole, you know, you want to be a doctor, that, you know, that's what a lot of us hear. And I know it can become a bit of a joke, but it was only because our parents thought it was a secure profession and we would have a job for life. So, you know, as a parent now, I'd want my children to go into a profession that I feel they'd be secure in. So I can understand why mum and dad sort of said, try and be a doctor. But unfortunately for me, or fortunately for me and unfortunately for mum and dad, I didn't have the inclination to go into medicine. I didn't have the grades. I still went along that kind of path because, like I said, I didn't know what I wanted to be. So I still went along with the A-levels, doing all science A-levels, because I thought, well, in the absence of anything else that I want to do, I may as well follow my parents' advice. But because it wasn't what I really wanted to do, it wasn't where my heart was, I didn't do very well at A-levels. You know, I actually failed my A-levels first time round. And, you know, if my kids are listening today, because I tell this story a lot in the schools that I visit, they'll be like, oh my God, Mum, you never told us that. But they've all done their A-levels now, so I'm okay. I can say that. But I did, Zainab, and it's because, you know, I didn't love what I was doing. And so, you know, I tried again and I had a look at alternatives, but there was no one that either reached out and said, have you thought about this? You were very much left to what your parents could sort of glean from other, you know, parents as to what the best way forward would be for your child. And then I ended up doing an actual chemistry degree for the want of doing anything better. And I did that at Sheffield. And I did pass it. I did enjoy it, but it wasn't my ultimate, you know, it wasn't me. It wasn't who I was.
Okay, that's very interesting. Well, as someone who's got a C and a D and 2 Fs in A-levels, I know exactly where you are coming from. And most of my followers are fully aware of my background, Sarah. And without, you know, going into it in a lot of detail, very similar to you, there was not that many role models. When I was growing up, I'm going back about 24, 25 years. When I was in high school, I could go a bit further back, and we're talking about primary, about 30 years ago. There wasn't that many role models, especially not somebody that we could relate to. And unfortunately, what I got growing up was because my academics were not strong, I got told by a lot of the teachers, by my peers really, that I'm not going to amount to anything and that I shouldn't really have any aspirations for making it big, you know, in speech marks. And that kind of monotonous tone, rhetoric, constantly being slayed at you day in, day out, you almost start to believe it, or actually I did believe that I wouldn't be able to be anything more than, you know, someone who's not going to have big dreams, big aspirations. So I know exactly where you are coming from, and I'm really glad to see now there's people like you, there's so many other people that I know that are trying to change that narrative, that mind shift. And it does start with what I class as our generation, because our parents are from abroad and they have brought their mindset with them. I mean, my father's quite modern, you know, speaks fluent English, although he can never text back, even though he can read my text messages, you know. He can
That might be intentional then.
yeah, you know. But even though he was quite modern and always wanted that education, he still brought his thinking to England. So did my mum. So there are lots of, you can't do this and you can't do that. So I know exactly where you're coming from, but I'm glad to see that we're not that, and we are going to try and change that narrative. Okay, so you've talked about what it is that you did. So you did a chemistry degree. Yeah. My uncle did that, and he never did anything with his chemistry degree either. So yeah.
It is a difficult degree to apply to something, right? Because what do you do with a chemistry degree? But you know, I then got married, and my husband, who was a lawyer at the time, suggested that I use that degree and convert it to a law degree. Now, I never knew that, and I don't know if many of your listeners are aware that if you have a non-legal degree, you can actually do a conversion course that changes it into a law degree, or allows you then to go down the legal path. And honestly, I didn't have a clue that existed. So for the, you know, because I didn't have any other path to follow, I never saw myself as a lawyer. I do remember my dad speaking about so-and-so's son, oh, he's a trainee solicitor, he must be so clever. And that was like, you know, above us. That was like, yeah, wow, he must be someone so clever. So it didn't occur to me that I could be a lawyer. But, you know, I one thing I learned about myself is I hate wasting time. So once I'd got the chemistry degree, it was like, where do I go next? And if I can't find a job that I can apply that to, I'll keep studying. So I studied the conversion course and then completed the LPC. And then it was left with, well, what kind of legal career do you want to go into? And still, it was very tentative. You know, we've spoken before, and even in the legal field, all those role models, when you go down to the Law Society and you see all those pictures in the corridors, they all showed different people to us. You know, they were all white, they were mainly male, and it was like, okay, that's a different world, and I'm trying to be a part of it. But you know, how far will I be accepted in this sort of career field? So
how far are we willing to go to be able? Because we need a lot of tenacity and a lot of feistiness in order to be able to break those glass barriers. That's what I always say. And you're absolutely right. It is quite difficult. In terms of the conversion course that you are referring to, I take it you're talking about the graduate diploma in law, because that's the one that I did.
GTL now, yeah. It used to be the common professional exams, the CPE. That's when I did it.
Yeah. So I did it when it was the GDL. But funnily enough, I actually don't have an undergraduate's degree. So I've got no undergrad, and I've got the GDL and then the LPC. But it's a very long story, and I won't get into it. But the SRA issued me with what was known as a mature student certificate that allowed me to get on the course. But even then, DMU rejected my application because they'd never seen that certificate. I had to meet a different criteria with the SRA. So me being me, threw my toys at the pram, effed and bleffed where I needed to within my four walls, and then got SRA to battle it out with DMU, who then allowed me onto the course the day before the course. So it's a whole another story, but we're not talking about me today. It's all about you. So the challenge is that, you're in your adult age now, and you've already faced quite a few challenges. You know, you mentioned there's no role models, but alhamdulillah, you had that support from your husband. And, you know, despite whatever your parents wanted you to get into, that support for you going into law was probably still there. So now you've done the GDL, you've done the LPC. Did you actually have any challenges in terms of looking for that training contract? Because we are going back when the profession was, I mean, the profession is still quite elite, don't get me wrong. Yeah. But back then it was even more elite than it is now. You know, only those people who could truly afford to go to university, or those people who had contacts in that industry, were the ones that would mostly come out with that training contract. And you've done that, but did you face any challenges in that area with the training contract aspect?
I did massively, because obviously when I did the LPC, and we have to say here that, going via a training contract route is not the only route into a career in law. There's lots of other careers that you can go for. And I'm very keen to stress that whenever the opportunity arises, that you can be involved in law, but you don't necessarily have to go down the barrister route or the solicitor route. But I decided I would go down the solicitor route. So, I had to apply for a training contract, and it was incredibly difficult then, and it still is now. This situation hasn't changed. A lot of it is, who just getting lucky, being in a firm that is recruiting at that time, and they've had an opportunity to see what you're like. But I wrote hundreds of letters asking for a training contract. And I wish Zainab I'd kept the rejection letters that I got every morning. I'd come down, see the doorstep, and see the letters on there. And it's soul destroying, and sometimes it'd say, no, we haven't got a position available. Sometimes they just send your CV back. I mean, why are you doing that for? What am I going to do with a crumpled CV? Save me the embarrassment. So it was hard work. And so eventually I got a job in it was in a law firm, but it was in a role that was very sort of like a sausage factory, in as if you're buying a house and it's a part of that chain. So there was not much legal application involved in it. It was just a process. And while I was there, I started applying again to try and see if I could get a training contract somewhere, and was unsuccessful. But what happened was, one day, somebody that I'd done the legal practice course with, he rung me up and he said, I'm working in a firm in central Bradford, and the family lawyer has left, and my boss is looking for a family lawyer. So why don't you come up and meet him? And I'm like, well, I don't know anything about family law. What am I going to do, when I meet him? He said, come up anyway, just speak to him. So the boss, I remember John, my first boss, and, one of the best bosses I've ever had, to be honest. He said to me, right, well, I do need a family lawyer. You're somebody looking for a training contract. Where are we going to meet in the middle here? So I suggested to him, I said, look, you need a family lawyer. What I know of family law, you can write on the back of a postage stamp. That's how much I know. But I'm willing to help. I'm willing to be a free pair of hands until you find and install a family lawyer into your firm. In the meantime, I'll work for you for free. I'll get some much needed work experience, and you'll get a free pair of hands. So he couldn't really say no to that. And I know a lot of people can't really make that kind of offer, but I was in the position that I could. So he took me on instantly. He said, okay, then that's fine. There's the filing cabinets, there's the diary, off you go. And it was the hardest 3 months of my life, Zainab. It was great for the diet, because I lost so much weight in those 3 months, because I was constantly trying to keep up with the work, keep up with the clients. I had a secretary that didn't like me very much, so she'd overpack the diary with clients. So it was really, really quite challenging. And at the end of the 3 months, I went to see my boss, and he said, well, your knowledge and your sort of experience has increased like this. So I'm not going to let you go, and I'm actually going to backdate a training contract to when you started. So essentially, he got to see who I was. He saw my work ethic. He saw that if I didn't know something, I went and read about it and I researched it. And that's what he saw in me. And it's funny to talk about this with you now, because that's what I see in my paralegals when I interview them. You can see a spark in there that just needs nurturing, that just needs some support, some reassurance, anything to bring out, who that person was. And the rest that they say is history. I finished my training contract there. And when you talk about breaking stereotypes, I went to then work for the West Yorkshire Police, which was, it was a job with a lot of kudos. As a brown woman and a Muslim woman, I had a little card that allowed me to get into any police station in West Yorkshire. And I still remember, people I'd get to the police station, and I'd go to the door, and they'd have to let me in. And they'd look at me as if, I had two heads or something, like, are you here to represent somebody in the police station? Or I said, no, I'm here because I work for the West Yorkshire Police, and I'm only here if you've done something wrong. So, it was quite a powerful position to be the solicitor for the chief constable, essentially.
I can
I
imagine.
love that job. Yeah, it was the best job in the world for me. The Home Secretary at the time was David Blunkett. He introduced a load of orders. I don't know if you've heard of football banning orders,
Yes.
sexual orders. They were brand new, Zainab, and nobody knew what to do with them because they were essentially civil in application, but if you breached them, it became a criminal offence.
Yeah.
So I was sort of thrown this set of orders to say, right, you'll need to sort these out. And I just took that as a challenge. And what I did was created a protocol that combined magistrates court, probation, police officers, essentially the whole chain to work together because there was none. And I'm very proud of that. And other police forces started to adopt that. But it just goes to show you that, if there isn't a path there carved for you, like I didn't have a path carved for me, but you follow what you know that you can do and what you're good at with hard work. And for me, my faith is incredibly important. I remember working at the police and it was Ramadan. And I remember thinking, I wanted to pray and there wasn't a place to pray. And I used to say to myself, I would love to work in a place that allowed me to observe my prayers. Not that I was at that time 5 a day or anything like that, but in Ramadan, you just need that extra, dose of prayer, spirituality. And, I always believed that I would get to that place where I'd be able to observe my faith and it wouldn't sort of, encompass upon my career or allow people to say, oh, your faith is overtaking everything else. And with Allah, I have a relationship where He's always been there, good, bad, ugly. People come, people go in your life. But for me, Allah has been constant. And I'm old enough now to see that whatever paths life's taken me down, it's been for a reason. So when you talked at the top of the show about Lawyer of the Year 22 in London, Lawyer of the Year in Yorkshire last month, that wasn't something that I set out to achieve. That honestly happened only by the grace of God, but through using those opportunities and chances to do good, not just to do good for my clients, but to do good for the people around me. Making the sort of SKB Academy to help people who were struggling. If all I can do is offer them a chance, then that chance might change their lives. And the Quran says throughout it is that we are tested on how we treat humanity, and that sits side by side with me being a lawyer. In fact, when I practice as a lawyer, a lot of the advice I give is down to the faith I believe in terms of what would be the best outcome for this client. So, those challenges, the police, the challenges were always, no one believed that I was a solicitor as a brown woman. I'd walk into meetings and a really sort of high profile meetings with chief superintendents, and they'll be still sitting there 10 minutes after the meeting has started and not saying anything. And I said, like, well, is the meeting going to start soon? And they'd be like, yeah, we're just waiting for the fourth solicitor to arrive. I'm like, well, I'm actually here.
Yeah.
Changing that conception. I mean, you may have had it. You go to court, you ask which courtroom a certain case is in. And the first thing always said to me was, are you the defendant? And I went, no, I'm not. I'm the lawyer. So, if all I can do is say to young people, who are from my community and beyond, that if you don't have a path that you think you can follow, carve your own. Because by doing that, I've been allowed to take certain risks within my business. And it's given me the freedom to make really bold decisions and then create meaningful change. And that's so exciting.
Absolutely. I'm going to stop you there because we've covered quite a lot and I do have some questions that have come from.
I thought you would. That's why I kept talking. So you couldn't ask me the question.
Very clever. Apologies for coughing away in the background. I seem to have developed a bit of a tickly cough. And I was trying my best not to disturb you. For those who have just tuned in, you are tuned in to Ramadan FM's Breaking Stereotypes show with your host, Zainab Zaeem. And today we have our lovely guest, which is Sarah Khan Bashir, MBE, who is a solicitor and law firm owner. Is it Bradford, am I correct?
Yeah, the hometown, the main office is in Bradford, yeah.
Got that right. I just wanted to make sure I got that right. Fantastic. Now, you mentioned quite a lot. Now, when you were talking, I mean, if anyone's tuned in using YouTube or Facebook, they're going to see me literally sat here beaming like a Cheshire cat in certain words or sentences that you were saying, because a lot of it I actually resonated with, a lot of it. And, you know, I had a business, a textile business, and, you know, I'm not here to talk about the stereotypes that people have got with textile industry, but I had one. And I remember we were actually visited by HMRC, who were doing regular audits on our unit. Because back in the day, contrary to what people think, we would get regularly audited, not because we'd done something wrong, but because that's just the way things work. They had their own protocols and so on to follow. And I remember I shared an office with my first ex-husband at the time. When I was in one corner, his table was in another. And the VAT lady, as I call her, walked in. She just plonked herself down in one of the spare chairs. And she didn't say hello. She didn't ask me who I was. So I just carried on working. And a good 10, 15 minutes later, she turned around and she goes, "Oh, when is this Mr. Zainab going to turn up?" And I looked at her and I said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Zainab." She goes, "Yes, I've got a meeting with this Mr. Zainab. How rude, you know, very late." And I said, "Well, first of all, Zainab's not a Mr. It's a she. And she has been sitting here for the last 10 minutes, but you didn't knock, you opened the door and you sat yourself down and you plonked your head inside a book. So I didn't really disturb you." And she goes, "Oh, well, I thought you were the receptionist." So I said, "Well, you thought wrong." And then she goes, "But you're way too young to be the director of a company." And I said, "Well, I didn't realize that there was an age limit. As far as I know, you had to be an 18 or over. And I was definitely 18, you know, I think I was in my 20s. So it goes to show that people have those, you know, barriers everywhere you go, those kind of, you know, it's just what...
Conceived ideas, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, you
Yeah.
mentioned the word when you said rejection. You said you wrote hundreds of letters and you got loads of rejections, and I can relate. But you mentioned the word soul destroying. Now, to our listeners out there, anyone who's in a similar position, whether that's the legal industry or any other industry, can you give us some tips on what you did to overcome that rejection, motivate yourself to carry on?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like I said before, my faith was a big part of everything I did and felt and went through. And I'd always try and reassure myself after obviously falling down in a big heap and having a bit of a cry and then picking yourself back up again. It's like, okay, well, these things are meant to try us. Everything does happen for a reason. And I do believe that. And it just makes you look at things differently. If I hadn't have got those rejections, if I hadn't have then been pushed into the job in the generic sort of process driven, you know, legal property firm, then I would have probably never been in the position to have that call, you know. And one of the main driving factors was that firm, as generic as it was a big firm. So when I then went to the boss who needed a family lawyer, when he heard where I was working, that was like a big star light up for him. Wow, they're a big firm, you know, you must be really good to work there, when really I wasn't. But you know, so you've got to see, and it's hard because I have this conversation with my daughters who are all sort of young. I mean, I say young, they're all, you know, degree, they've all gone to university and they're out doing their own things in the world. But it's always like your path, you have to take those steps forward, but your path is destined in a way for you. You have to though make the moves to create and use those opportunities. Everything that comes your way, Zainab, is an opportunity. So what I would say to anybody in that position is, yeah, okay, have you cry and you moan and you vent on whatever it is, and think of a way around it. You know, they always say if there's not a door open, create a window, find another way. I mean, like I mentioned to you earlier, when I struggled to pray at the police because there wasn't the facilities or the setup or the management, who'd have thought, you know, 20 years later, I'd be owning a practice where I could say to my team, you can all have Fridays off during Ramadan to observe your I mean, that, so you have to believe that, you know, if you want something, you will find a way to achieve it. Disappointment isn't permanent, it's
Absolutely.
temporary. Yeah, so
Absolutely.
you just have to find a way around it, you
I
know.
just
And
I like what you said. You know, you're in a position to be able to observe Islam and your faith. And one of the questions was, did you feel your career clashing with that of your faith? But you've beautifully explained that. Now, there's going to be a lot of people out there who are not going to be able to be in a position like you or I, where we've got understanding employers who allow us to take a couple of minutes here or there and take that break. But what I would say to any listeners out there is do what you can, right? And don't overthink it. If you can't pray your Adhan namaz, then Allah does allow us to pray our qaza, right? So, and the reason why I say that is because I know a lot of people who, alhamdulillah, you know, they're so full of their belief of Islam, but actually what they've done is they've sacrificed so many of their jobs because of certain parts of Islam. And that's fantastic because, you know, Allah will always give you more and more and more. However, Allah also says, exactly like you said, take what opportunity you can and make it your own. Who knows, by you working for that employer, and you request to pray your namaz 4 times a day, 3 times a day, how many namaz comes during your working shift, they might allow you to slowly but surely, and then they might change their policy and allow more people. They might create a room. And we actually had that in one of our old workplaces, talking 2015, 2016. Not many upnays, shall we say, you know, not many Muslims used to work there. And few of the guys used to go to the local university to pray namaz. But sometimes when you had back-to-back meetings, it wasn't always possible to leave the office. So they would request to pray namaz in a basement, a tiny space in the basement. And they did that for a few months. And then the boss found out that, you know, there's a group of men actually going downstairs in the basement. So he had the caretaker clean a certain section of that basement and make it at least, you know, more safer, more clean, for them to pray. The guys then brought their masallas in, and that masalla then stayed there on that floor. Nobody was allowed to go in that section. You know, it was completely blocked off for them. And it was because he didn't have anybody before he used to request it. Do you see what I mean? Yeah. So be the change. If you want change, you've got to be that change. Now, you mentioned about, you know, praying, and you were in West Yorkshire, and a lot of that takes belief in yourself. And I'm sure you'll agree that if you don't believe in yourself, it's going to be very difficult for you to overcome any challenges. Yeah. But you mentioned something that I've picked up on, which is you had the support of your husband, alhamdulillah, and your family. And I come across a lot of people who don't, and they've had to make a lot of sacrifices in order to meet certain personal commitments. What would your advice to be to those people who are maybe contemplating what to do and who might not have that support? Would you have any advice for these young children? Because I know quite a few, and, you know, it's one thing for me to give my opinion, but I would really like your opinion on that.
That's a really great question, Zainab. Now, the SKB Law Academy was created because of exactly that. Because during our work, where we would go into local schools, colleges, and universities and talk to them about getting into the legal profession, we became acutely aware that a lot of people didn't have the support networks like, for example, you might have, I had, or my children have, because obviously, you know, we're moving on in the profession, you know, people that we know around us have access to us. But there's still a lot of people, particularly from our community, particularly in places like Bradford, I don't know what Leicester's like, where that young person might still be the first person looking at going to university or college. It's still happening. So who asks them to check? Who do they ask to check their personal statement for university? Who do they ask to check their CV and make it in a form that somebody will stop and read it? There simply isn't that support network for some people. So the employability workshops we created were to help those people in that kind of position, to say, we will help you with that. We will open up our networks. A lot of the outreach work that we do, me and my team, we say to young people, right, you've met us today. We are now in your network. So you mentioned LinkedIn, but LinkedIn is connect with me. You connect with my network. Use that network. You know, look for a mentor. One of the things that I had was even in my big old age, I met somebody who was like a cheerleader, whether it was good or bad, she would be, a phone call away to say, maybe you need to do it like this. That's good what you're doing. Maybe not so much like that. You need a good support network of either friends or family who may or may not understand your profession or what you're doing, but they believe in you and they believe what you can achieve. So that's very, very important. That's the first thing I'd say is reach out to get a mentor, reach out to get somebody who you can trust and rely on. Go to every event that comes your way. And I always say this to young people, whether the event is related to your career or not, whether it's related to your interests or not, you should always go. Because Zainab, the amount of events I've been to which haven't been directly relating to my job, but I have met the most amazing people, and your interactions, if they're always kind, you will meet those people again in life, because life is short and the world is small. And
Absolutely.
those people cross your path. Every person in your life crosses your path for a reason. It's up to you to take the time to find out why that person is crossing your path. The second thing is, I met you in the House of Lords, because what we did, we launched a network called the Aura Network. And the reason for that was exactly what you were talking about, is that there are a lot of women like you and I in this profession, all at different stages, whether it's entry level into the legal profession, whether it's partner level, whether it's looking at becoming a judge. But it's a very lonely place still. So we created this network so we had access to people like you and me, and we could bounce ideas off or get support from, or say, look, I want to go for this high position, but I don't know how to sit for the interview. I don't know what questions. Can you help me with that? And, you remember Sayeda Wasi was there, and she said
Yes.
something really poignant and something that needs to be said again and again. People like Lubna Shuja, who was and we're so proud of her. She's the first Muslim South Asian female president of the Law Society. So remember those pictures I was talking about at the beginning of the interview in the Law Society of mainly white presidents of the Law Society. We now have a Muslim brown woman. So you talk about breaking stereotypes. I never thought I'd see that in my lifetime, and alhamdulillah, we've seen it. But the thing is you have to lift other women, brown women, Muslim women with you. You can't just tread that path and get there by yourself, because it's a very lonely place to be. And I've always said that if you shine, then you lift others with you. These awards, this Lawyer of the Year 22, this Yorkshire Legal Lawyer of the Year 23, I haven't done that out of any ego. It's been amazing. I was sitting there and, they are mainly middle to large firms that attend these events. The partners are mainly white there. Never in a month of Sundays did I think that they would say the name Sarah Khan Bashir at the end of the night for the main award of the night. I was absolutely literally gobsmacked. But what I was proud of is going onto that stage and accepting it. And in, a sea, the diversity is getting better, don't get me wrong. But in a sea of mainly white faces, it was a brown woman holding that trophy. And I wanted other brown, Muslim women to say, she's done it for us, because that opens the doors for everybody thinking, well, yeah, it's a Muslim woman, a brown woman that won that award. Maybe I need to look at the ones I've got for partnership, because they'll probably be capable of doing it. So there's no good me just being there. There's no good Lubna just being there. And Sayeda Wasi's, the comment she made, which I say is so poignant, is that there is still not a lot of sisterhood, amongst women. And that has to change. You can't be a lone star in this.
This is something I regularly say. Sorry to interrupt you there. Now, you mentioned mentor and you mentioned House of Lords. The reason why I did get that invitation was because actually there was a young girl who I mentor who tagged me in a comment that you'd put up about people who had changed their lives. And next thing you know, I was invited to the House of Lords, and that in itself was a privilege and an honor.
When you say that, look at the way we met. It's just incredible.
Now, I set out to be a mentor, exactly like what you said, not for the ego trip of it or not to hear my own voice, even though I love to talk and I'm a chatterbox and so on. But it is because when I was in university, I was assigned a non-Asian mentor Now, her ethnicity has nothing to do with the way she approached the mentorship with me. I only mentioned it because there wasn't enough BAME, or rather it was non-existent when I was in university 13 years ago. Now, unfortunately, she must have had an off day, and she was from a very prestigious law firm. And there's me all hyped up, thinking, yay, I've been assigned a mentor from this place. I went all prepared, and unfortunately, she spent 1 hour dissing her employer, not really asking me how it's going and so on. I never got a question in edgewise, which says a lot considering the chatterbox that I am. So I made myself a promise at the time that if I ever become a solicitor, if I ever am in a position to be a mentor, I will be that mentor that I wanted and I never got. And as soon as I qualified in 2019, that's all I've done. Every spare minute I get, I mentor students from various universities, people on LinkedIn, whoever reaches out to me. And I don't do it, like you said, for that egotistical show that people probably think, oh yeah, she's only doing it because she wants to get hyped up. I'm doing it because I've noticed women don't put women up. They put women down. Women are notorious, and I've seen it with my own eyes. You know, women put women down, and we actually need more people like yourself, Baroness Vasi, you know, Lubna Sahuja, in the profession, lifting young people's spirits, because at the end of the day, they are going to be the next generation of professionals, whether that's lawyers, doctors, teachers, doesn't matter what industry, they're going to be the next set of professionals. And we need to be that role model for them. We need to show them we are good, but you can be better. It's as simple as that. You know, we are good, but be better than us. Use whatever mistakes we've made or whatever decisions we've taken that haven't worked out, learn from it, grow from it, and take it one step further. Now, we have about 6 minutes on the clock, and we've covered quite a bit, but you did mention your academy, so I do have a question about the academy, please. Now, I know you're based in, you know, Yorkshire. That's where your main hub is, your main office. The academy, is it open to the locals there, or is it open to the whole country in UK?
Yeah, it's open to anyone who wants to apply. Essentially, we arrange legal training. We try and arrange work placements. We've supported over 1,000 students, you know, with the academy, over 50 work placements. And for a firm our size, I mean, that's pretty incredible. I'd challenge any middle to large firm to say that they've offered that much work experience, but it's a question of wanting to do it. You know, I always say this to firms to say, oh, well, we haven't got the setup to do it. We haven't got the people to do it. You know, my team have created a structured work experience program, which is basically a booklet. And, you know, the student comes, or whoever it is, you know, we have moms returning back to law after a break raising children. So, you know, they don't feel in the way. They're not sitting there making cups of tea and photocopying like a lot of work experience seems to be. They're actually doing real life problems. And if we're able to then take them to court with us, if we're able to allow them to sit in client meetings, they get a real feel for it. The only shame for us is that we can't reach more people because, you know, capacity wise. So we are thinking quite creatively about that, Zainab. So watch this space. We are wanting to reach more students using digital products. So we are trying to create something around that line.
What's now going to happen is you're going to be inundated with a lot of my mentees.
Don't mind.
But you know what? It's fantastic work. And as somebody who actually struggled to get work experience, funnily enough, I had a lot of life and commercial work experience when I finished university, and I was an immigration advisor in my own right, and I had my own my legal immigration firm. My barrier was the fact that I didn't have an undergraduate's degree in those days, and a 2-1 or a first class honours and so on. And I'm really glad to see that the narrative has shifted over the years. So anyone who's listening in thinking, well, in order to do a law degree, in order to be a teacher, in order to be, you know, a doctor, things are changing. There's lots of different routes. Now, you did mention earlier that there's lots of other routes. Now, had I known 8-9 years ago that I could do maybe a solicitor apprenticeship route or go down the Silex route or legal assistant route, I would have qualified as a lawyer many moons ago. But at the same time, I wouldn't have the story to tell that I have today. So things work out for a reason. Like you said, you know, everything happens in life for a reason. But those who are listening in, there's always a different way. Never take no for an answer is what I always say. And what I always say to my mentees is, when you do get rejected, let out the steam. It's okay to cry. It's okay to do whatever you need to get that out of your system. But then brush yourself up, get back up, and figure out that plan to get to where you need to get to. And from everything that you've said, Sarah, that's exactly what you've done. And you know what? It's interesting when you talked about your role in West Yorkshire Police. I really wish I was a fly on the wall during your heydays in that role.
It was a bit. I mean, look, to finish off, Zainab, all I'd say to people who are thinking about it and getting loads of disappointments, yeah, of course we are going to have disappointments, but there is a place for everybody in this world. There is a purpose, Honestly, my belief is that Allah has created each and every one of us with a purpose. We have to find that purpose, whatever that purpose is. And one thing I like to do with students or people that come and speak to us about employability and getting into careers is I say to them, if you've got somebody that you trust, it could be a best friend, it could be a sibling, it could be a parent that you're very close to, sit down with them and honestly ask them, have an honest conversation and say, tell me what I'm good at. Tell me what you think are my natural abilities, because every child, every young person, every adult, everyone is born with their own unique set of abilities. And the tragedy for me is when I meet people that haven't, one, realized what those special, unique skills and qualities are, but second of all, haven't had the chance or the opportunity or even made their own opportunity to go and find what those skills are. And so, if someone says you're good at organization, you're good at talking, those are the kind of careers you want to be looking at that set or complement your natural skills. Because if you follow a career path that complements what you are naturally good at, you'll never feel like you're working a day in your life.
Absolutely. What I always say to people is, know your strengths and weaknesses and identify what those are. Use your strengths to prop up your weaknesses and use your weaknesses to increase your strengths tenfold. Let the two complement one another and don't be shy about understanding, identifying and increasing your weaknesses to make them better. Now we've got about a minute on the clock. Now you've covered a lot of tips, but can you give us maybe 2 or 3 golden nuggets in about 20 seconds so that the viewers can see what your golden nuggets are?
I will try. So the first thing I would say to everyone is be kind to everybody, no matter who you meet in life. Some people might be unkind to you, fine, my belief is walk away. I know my youngest would probably say, no, Mom, you stand up to them, but be kind to everyone, because I've seen, Zainab, that person crosses your path later in life and that kindness pays back dividends.
Yeah, don't burn your bridges. Absolutely.
Don't burn your bridges ever, really. Believe in yourself. That's the biggest thing. And confidence comes from inside. Strengthen your faith, strengthen your iman, because honestly, if you've got Allah on your side, there's nothing that you can't do.
Absolutely. The only limit is you. And that's what I always say. And I keep going on and on about it. The only limit is you. The only person that's going to make it is yourself. Now, we've got about 10 seconds in the clock, so I'm going to sign off. This is Breaking Stereotypes on Ramadan FM with your host, Zainab Zaeem, with our lovely guest, Sarah Khan Bashir, MBE. Thank you so much, Sarah Khan, for attending.